So last week, as we began together, we took some time to establish the overarching message and purpose of the book. And I want to ask you this to get you thinking a little bit. As you think about it, there's three things that we would say are the overarching purpose and message of the book. Can you tell me what those three things are? And I don't expect you to have captured them from last week and to have them stuck away in your memory, but it's a good thing for us to think about why it is that we have this book that's called Revelation. What was the intent of the Spirit of God as the Spirit of God revealed this to John, as he worked through John and provided this for us? What was the intent in all of this? Was it to really, make sure that you provide some sort of good chart that everybody can follow through with all sorts of colorful wild animals on it and things like that? What was the purpose behind the book of Revelation? Why did the Spirit of God give this to the church? What do you think? Okay, to make us study it. Okay. But we know that we can just as we study, Paul says, knowledge puffs up, love builds up. So we understand that we're not just talking from the perspective of let's do what we can to obtain head knowledge. Pardon? Well, there were false teachers. That's true. And they did have to deal with false teachers and the understanding of false teachers. But really, there's three overarching purposes, and I want you to keep these in mind, okay? First thing is, Revelation is saying God is sovereign over history, no matter how chaotic it or your lives look. Okay? So understand that is the first reason for Revelation. It's declaring God is sovereign over history, no matter how chaotic history looks, no matter how your lives look. God is sovereign. Okay, second thing, as we take a look at it, is it's declaring that Jesus Christ will return and establish his rule, and it's unstoppable. When Jesus Christ returns to establish his rule, as God is sovereign, Christ will be unstoppable in the establishment of his rule, no matter how big the forces around you may seem, no matter how scary they may seem. Christ will establish his rule, and nobody will stop him. And the third, and this is what we would call the immediately applicational point for us, the third point is be on the right side. In other words, and that's not taken and be on the right side from the perspective of, see, I'm right and you're wrong. That's be on the right side from the perspective of live holy lives in light of the fact that Jesus is coming back. Live lives that are wholly devoted to God in light of the fact that Jesus Christ will return. If you remember those three things as you read through the book of Revelation, you will be in a very good place to get the value out of this that you're supposed to, because there are all sorts of crazinesses that come out of this when people don't maintain those three things as their understanding of the book. There are all kinds of ways that people get into sensationalism and what I would call spiritual rubbernecking and everything else when they lose sight of the fact that this is about the sovereignty of God, this is about the unstoppability of Jesus Christ's kingship, and this is about the fact that we want to be people who worship God and live holy lives in light of that. You get that, and you're going to be getting the value out of this that God has provided it for, the purpose that God has provided it for. So, and as we took some time and as we talked about that a little bit last week, we spent some time in Matthew 24, and we did that because I think Matthew 24, where the disciples say, okay, Jesus, tell us when these things will be and what will be the sign of your coming. They ask for that, and what happens is over the next number of verses, a lot of times people read Matthew 24, and as they read it, I think that they read it carelessly, and what they do is they're busy saying, okay, they actually they actually don't listen to Jesus' answer to the disciples. And instead they go to, I'm going to be the guy who understands how this is ripped from the headlines. You know, they look at the headlines of the geopolitical events around them, and they do all their this is that sort of stuff. Jesus' answer right through Matthew 24 is, be humble, you won't know, but be aware these things are going to unfold in history. Be humble as you approach the whole thinking about the fact that you're trusting in the return of Christ and you see the chaos. Don't make declarations. And so he says, the day or the hour, no one knows. And I know that there has been a whole, I jokingly called it last week, the Revelation industrial complex. There has been a whole sub-economy, genre of books, movies, everything else that's been built around people trying to make money being prognosticators. This is that. I know this. And I named names. And the reason I named names is because the crazy thing is some of these people have been making money off of the evangelical community for decades, and nobody goes back and says, wait a second, 40 years ago you said this was that. Why aren't we firing you? So we understand as we come to the scripture that what we're not supposed to be doing is looking at this from the point of view of a ripped from the headlines approach. Even as I think that when we see events unfolding, they are things to point us back to the fact that, but we trust in the sovereignty of God and the return of Jesus Christ. We have the hope of the return of Jesus Christ. And I believe even as these things have taken place throughout history, that again and again, as people have come to crisis moments, those crisis moments should be causing them to say, but we believe in the sovereignty of God throughout the chaos of history, and we trust in the return of Jesus Christ. That's where our hope is. There's no doubt in my mind that some in Ukraine today are probably wondering if Putin is the Antichrist. And I'm not saying that's, by the way, that's not a condemnatory statement on my part, but there's no doubt in my mind that that's flowing through the thinking of some. They're wondering. And wondering is not a problem. But remember, Hitler was also the Antichrist. Saddam Hussein was also the Antichrist. Mussolini was also the Antichrist. All through, you follow back through. Napoleon was the Antichrist. I mean, all through, there have been people who have made this is that declarations, and they've tried to rip things from the headlines. So we have to be people who are thoughtful about this, even as we remember that John, same author here, said in 1 John, there will be many antichrists. There will be many who stand against the sovereign rule of Jesus Christ. And he says that even while we see that there will be many who stand against Jesus Christ, there will be many antichrists, that's in 1 John 2, he says that even as we consider the fact that the picture is that there is probably, it looks like there's a final, a culminating figure at the end of history who is going to put himself up against Jesus Christ. Satanically motivated, satanically empowered, put himself up against Jesus Christ. But we're very, very careful as we look at our present geopolitical situation, even as I wonder, I take a look at things and I think to myself, what's going to happen with Russia? What's going to happen with China? What's going to happen even, I walk in and I know that it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, but I look at No Frills, I walk through No Frills and I take a look at the like almost empty cereal aisle. And I think to myself, as I look at the almost empty cereal aisle, I think to myself, so what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You know, we're hearing all sorts of words right now about what's going on as far as wheat and grain and the growth of these things over the next number of months. And I do have to ask myself questions. When it says that how does it say it exactly? I'm trying to remember. It says a day's wage for a quart of wheat, a day's wage for a quart of barley, but don't touch the oil and the wine. I read those words and I think to myself, when it talks about I think it's the black horse being released, and it says a day's wage for a quart of wheat, a day's wage for a quart of barley, but don't touch the oil and wine. I think to myself, okay, so it's talking there about the fact that the average person is going to really face scarcity in the light of the circumstances as the circumstances unfold. But as they face scarcity, the wealthy people are still going to have their oil and wine. And you think, well, that's a really curious thing to think about as I think about the unfolding of circumstances. But all of that with a sense of the fact that we still come to the Scripture with humility, without a this is that declaration. Do we think? Do we wonder? Yes, we think. We wonder. Larry Norman, the old Larry Norman song that some of you who have been Christians for a number of years might have been very aware of from, if you're a 60s, 70s, person, then you would have remembered the days are filled with guns and war and everyone was trampled on the floor. I wish we'd all been ready. Children died. The days grew cold. A piece of bread would buy a bag of gold. I wish we'd all been ready. And and I found myself, that was going through my mind. And I was thinking about that. But as I come to Revelation, I also understand that Revelation has been a book for the community of faith over 2,000 years. And as it's been the book for the community of faith over 2,000 years, people have wondered in the past. But the big messages, God is sovereign over history. Jesus Christ will return. We trust that he, the unstoppable King, will return to establish his kingdom, and I want to live a holy life in the light of that. Those are the things that we keep in mind. By the way, there will be a test on this. So, okay. I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you to remember those things so you can tuck them away in your mind. And some of you are going to have to work really hard to try and beat Marcy, because I know she'll get it. Okay, so because that's what happens in these classes. It becomes a little bit of a speed test to see who remembers. But if you stop to consider, there are a whole lot of people, as we said, whose jobs and incomes rest on their ability to predict the future. And we're in Revelation 1. And as we come to the opening book of Revelation, I think of how many people work to predict the future. I think of market analysts and financial planners and social scientists and weathermen and climatologists and demographers and futurists and game theorists. You know, there's a whole academic field out there called game theory, where what happens is the game theorists sit down and they're supposed to they're given all sorts of situations, whether by military analysts or politicians, and they're supposed to game them out and say, okay, what are the possibilities that come out of this circumstance? They're economists, lots of newspaper pundits try and make their income out of predicting what's going to happen with the present circumstances. There's all sorts of people whose jobs and incomes rest on their ability to predict the future. And we pay them to help us prepare for what will come. Because as humans, we're always looking forward. We have this tendency to say, what's going to come next? What's going to unfold? And of course, as we pay these people, whether they be the weathermen or demographers or whatever they might be, as we pay them, we have confidence in the speaker only if they have a great track record. That's why most of us, when we go to the weather report, have a kind of a real skepticism about what the weather person is going to predict. Because the fact is, we know, I mean, already this winter there were different times, and we had a fair bit of snow this winter, but there were different times when we were told that there was going to be a massive snowfall, and the massive snowfall didn't show up. And then there were other times when we were told that we weren't going to, things were going to be pretty clear that day, and we had a couple of those this winter where all of a sudden we're thinking, wait a second, what's this 20 centimeters of snow doing on the ground this morning? So we have confidence if the speaker has a great track record. Revelation 1 through 8 is really, in a lot of ways for us, establishing the confidence we are to have in the book and in the message that's to come. It says this, if you want to look there with me, please, in Revelation 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants, the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. John, to the 7 churches that are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is and who was and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before his throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of kings on earth. To him who loves us and has freed us from our sins by his blood and made us a kingdom, priests to his God and Father, to him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all tribes of the earth will wail on account of him. Even so, Amen. I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty. As we look at the opening verses of Revelation, which we think of, this book we think of as pointing to the future, it makes sense that what happens is the author, John, who is inspired by the heavenly author, establishes the authoritative and trustworthy source of the message. And that's what he's doing in these opening verses. He's establishing that we can trust what is being said here. Why is this so important to the recipients? Think back then. Why would this have been so important to the recipients as they received this from John to have established for them the trustworthiness of what they were going to read? What's so significant about this? Why the need to have the authority of this established? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that Tom's got it exactly right. They're going to go through some terrible things. In fact, I think that they already have gone through some terrible things. But as they've gone through some terrible things, and they are going to go through some terrible things, they are stuck in the very thing that we were talking about when we talked about why Revelation was given. They are dealing with the chaos of history and of their lives. And as they're dealing with the chaos of history and of their lives as people who have put their trust in Jesus Christ, and they're trying to sort their way through that, then it's necessary for them, as they're facing chaos, as they're facing persecution, it's essential to their lives. In lives that are unstable and often filled with pain, it's essential for them to know that what they're reading actually is going to make sense of present and future events. And this is what Revelation does for us when we understand who the author, who the source of it is. It causes us to be able to look and say, in the course of instability, in the course of chaos, and let's face it, in Canada we live pretty comfortable lives. But in the course of instability and in the course of chaos, and as we try and figure things out, and even as maybe the potential for threat arises or anything like that, we want the assurance from the one who Hebrews calls the anchor of our soul. We want to know that as we're living life with our feet in a stable place, trusting in one who we can trust in. And comforting words are nice. Having someone who's your friend say to you, there, it's okay. That can be nice. But the fact is, words that make meaning for us, that explain a meaning for us, are far more powerful. So yes, we comfort one another, but when we get words that help us really understand how we live in a world that can be unstable, where things can turn upside down, and we know that the final word for us is hope. When we have that, particularly if these words come from the Lord of heaven and earth and the Lord of history, that's a really good thing. And I think if you are someone who comes to revelation with the recognition of what it is that Jesus Christ is providing for us in this, then I think you're able to look at the ups and downs and always hold on to what I consider to be a really important theological statement. And that really important theological statement is this: it's okay. And I know that sounds simplistic, but the fact is, when you can say it's okay, the Lord of heaven and earth is at work for good, then that makes a profound difference in the course of the aches and pains and struggles and bigger things than that. So he starts out the revelation of Jesus Christ. And even as we get into this and as we start to pull it apart, I'm going to pull apart that first word, apocalypse, or revelation, because revelation or apocalypse, which is the Greek word apocalypso there, our colloquial understanding of or apocalypse is very interesting, isn't it? What do we think of usually when we hear the word apocalypse? How's that word used in our day-to-day language? Disaster, okay? So we hear the word apocalypse and we think disaster, we think earth-shaking event. But literally what that word means is from behind the curtain, okay? So apocalypse means from behind the curtain. And as we think about that, what we're seeing here is there is in the biblical worldview the understanding that we have a world we see. Okay, a world of what the philosophers would call phenomenological events. Okay, we have a world that we see, and we also understand that there is behind the curtain a world that we don't see. And the world that we don't see affects the world that we do see. The actions behind the curtain affect what's going on in the world where we put our feet on the hard ground and look around us and see what's happening. So this is the from the behind the curtain look of Jesus Christ. The curtain is being pulled back for us to understand how God is at work in the events and circumstances that we see. And it's called the revelation of Jesus. And that, even as we go into a word like of, is an important word. Is he saying the revelation about Jesus, or is he saying the revelation from and belonging to Jesus? And if it's about, well, what it's saying is that Christ's person and work is being unveiled for us. And we believe that Revelation is that. It's Christ's person and work being unveiled to us. It's going to emphasize, the book is going to emphasize Jesus' kingship authority over the unfolding world events. And as Jesus shows us this, he shows us himself and he shows us the Father. that, by the way, is a little bit of a bunny trail, but one of the things that I think we have to understand always is if we're going to understand and know the true God, the only way that we understand and know the true God is if we know Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the one who, by living here in this world in front of us, actually helps people whose minds are really, really limited to have a clearer understanding of the character and nature of God. If we don't see Jesus living it out, one of the things that I'm always convinced of is that even as we study the character and nature and attributes of the God who dwells above us in ineffable light, high above us, I don't think that I really can comprehend who God is. Later on, when I start reading about him sitting on a throne, and there's absolutely no effectively human description for him other than the fact that he looks like jasper and carnelian. In other words, that there's this sparkling picture of light that's there. These jewels, and I think what John's saying in all of this is, you know what? Even as I looked at the one who sat on the throne, using the human eyesight and everything like that, trying to work inside of the world of things that we can see and hear, and he said, I couldn't understand him. So Jesus is the one who reveals to us the Father in terms that humans with like baby talk level understanding can have some degree of knowledge of who God is. And that's why it says that no one has seen God at any time in John 1, but the only begotten from the bosom of the Father, he has revealed him. That word seen is more than just an eyesight seen. That's actually no one has comprehended, no one has had any comprehension of God at any time. But Jesus has given us, for our limited human understanding, a little bit of an understanding of who he is. Later on, Thomas will say, show us the Father and it suffices us. Show us the Father and it's enough. And Jesus says to him, have I been with you so long? If you've seen and you don't understand who the Father is, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So Jesus is the one who reveals to us who God is. And that's where we have to look again and again if we want to understand in this world whether we're walking on the side of the Father. Anybody who says that they worship God but acts in defiance of the character and nature of Jesus Christ, who is living in this world, is misunderstanding. So, revelation about Jesus and the revelation of also he's from or belonging to Jesus. He alone has the authority to unveil this for us. This is from him. And I think of what it says over in Revelation chapter 5, verse 7, or verses 4 through 7. At this point, John is struggling. It says, I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. In other words, he says, I didn't know how to figure out human history. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I had no ability to understand what was going on as I'm living in the middle of this chaos, as I'm living in this world that I'm living in. And one of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And I point forward to this, and Yeah, we'll study it more later in depth, but the thing that I want us to get as we think about the revelation of Jesus Christ is that Christ is the one through whom we must see history. He is the one who has the right to unfold the scroll of history and show us exactly what is going on to help us understand this world that we are living in. We understand this world that we are living in through the lens of Jesus Christ. That is always the case. We understand this world that we are living in through the lens of Jesus Christ. I've got 5 more minutes. Okay. So who is this for? As we look into this, it says there, which God gave him to show to his servants. And when we look at that, that's an important thing. So Revelation is not for a general audience. It's not for curiosity seekers. It's not for people who are looking to be entertained. It's not for people who are spiritual rubberneckers. It's not for people who are just wanting to be in the know. So there's lots of that. We come to God's word with a higher purpose. It's for the people who intend to serve Jesus Christ. This is for those who are following Christ to actually serve Jesus Christ. And as we come with this higher purpose, it's evident in the twofold blessing that follows. It says, blessed is the one, it says in verse 3, who reads aloud the word of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. And as you take a look at that blessing, there are 2 groups. Who are the 2 groups that you see in verse 3? Tell me who the 2 groups are. Pardon? Okay, I'm going to actually divide it differently, John. I'm going to say those who read, and then those who hear and keep. Okay, but yeah, that's the essence of it. These are 2 groups of people, and when it's talking about it, it's talking about the fact that the ones who actually declare who God is, who Jesus Christ is, they are blessed for the fact that they are declaring the truth about who Jesus Christ is and about his lordship over history and about the fact that we are called to follow him. There is blessing in that. And then the other blessing that goes with it is the blessing of being people who actually then listen to and do the message. And I think that that's a really key thing for us to understand, and this is exactly why I say this isn't about spiritual rubbernecking. This isn't about drawing charts and making sure that we've got all the details that we can say we're in the know. Because when it says those who hear and those who keep, and I present that as one group because of the fact that there's a Greek principle behind it that says when you see things set out like this, it's something called the Granville-Sharp rule, and it says these things are in apposition, and that indicates just one person. But when we see that, then what we understand out of this is the fact is when we come to the Word, we always come to the Word with the intent being more than just accumulating head knowledge. Again, 1 Corinthians 8. Knowledge puffs up, love builds up. We're supposed to do something with the Word. So why do we have to both hear and keep? Well, we both hear and we both keep. We both listen to, but then we actually say, I am going to live out this word because of the fact that before God, knowledge alone is of no value. And this is a consistent principle, isn't it? James 1:22 says, be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Because everyone who comes to the word, the perfect law of liberty, and looks into it and then walks away is like a man who looks into a mirror And after he's looked into the mirror, he walks away from it and straightway forgets what kind of man he is. When we come to the Word, we always come to the Word with the intent of then taking and saying, how am I going to live? And we don't have any more time today, but this is the thing that not only here, but any time we come to the Word, I think that has to be the question that we ask. Okay, so I've looked into the Word of God. I've read it. I've considered it. How am I going to live today in the light of it? When we sit down in microchurch, and as we sit down there and as we go through and we ask the three questions, what does this tell me about God? What does this tell me about people? Then the third question is always, what's the lesson that I'm going to learn from this? What am I going to do in the light of this? What am I going to do in the light of what I just learned? Because it's of no value to us to show up every Sunday and then not go out and live what it is that we're learning. In fact, that's the thing that always is the accusation against Christians, isn't it? That we believe certain things we say, but that our actions don't display it. So we're brought back to this. We hear and keep, because knowledge alone is of no value. God's work is to change us, and he reveals himself, and he reveals human history for us to draw us to him so that we desire him and desire to be like him. And he wants communion with people who love what is good. And this is where we'll move faster after this, but this is where I really, really want to make sure that we've got ourselves established in the idea that we come to this with the recognition that constantly we are asking the question, so how am I going to live more like Jesus Christ? Now, when I say we hear the word and then we seek to do it, I'm not saying out of this that I'm going to be giving you, your survival manuals and telling you what you have to pack away in your survivalist bunker and how many guns you have to buy and everything else. Okay, so I mean, and this is what I mean by the crazy side of Revelation, right? People figure out all sorts of stuff. You see these apocalyptic communities that build up out of this and stuff, and you're thinking to yourself, they have missed completely what the point of the book is. We want to be people who walk away from this worshiping God more, loving God more, and living as followers of Jesus Christ more. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. And I will try not to make this study drag, but if we get this, if we get the fact that we come to the book with the intent of being people who, we're going to fail, but who are saying, okay, whatever happens, I am living as a person who is hoping in Christ. I know that I can trust him no matter what. I'm living as a person who looks at the events of history unfolding around me, but I'm settled in the sovereignty of God. And I'm looking at this, and I'm living as a person who wants to be more like Christ in the way that I conduct myself in the world. Then we will have used this book in the manner that God intended. Okay, so let's pray, and we'll be dismissed. Father, thank you for allowing us to come to your truth and teaching us out of it, and I pray that we would be people who are learners, who are able to rest in the greatness of who you are, the fact that we trust you as the owner of history, the one who is sovereign over everything. May we be people who look to Jesus Christ, the King, who is going to return, and may we be able to rest in the light of that, not be people who are fearful or nervous or worried, but people who rest in the fact that Jesus Christ will return, and this is where our hope lies. And out of this, may we be people who establish our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus, desiring to follow him, desiring to live out our faith in a joyful, hopeful way in this world. Yes, thoughtful, yes, aware of the struggles and the chaos and the difficulty, but always, always hopeful, because we are followers of Jesus. May we desire to live wholly on his side. I pray this in the name of your Son, our Savior. Amen.